Just before we start today's video, sincere apologies for not uploading for a little more than 2 weeks, or close to 2 weeks, because I recently succumbed to a pretty bad flu, and in fact, I'm still a bit under the weather. So apologies for that. But during this time of, being bedridden, or during this time of not exactly doing any productive work, I had a lot of time to read. And I had a lot of time to assemble some of the thoughts that I wanted to present in this video. And hence, here it is. Today, we're going to take a very grand tour, or today, we're going to tackle another problem at its root, which is, why is it the case that so many students are simply not motivated to learn the subjects that they're tackling? Or why are there so many unmotivated students in the education system? What is this entire mess about? So in this video, I'm going to attempt to draw some similarities and conclusions from some of the readings that I've done recently. But before we start that entire rant or video essay, before we start that entire grand tour, from the dangers of received ideas to the deceptive simplicity of the stuff that you're learning, here is some housekeeping. So if you're interested in what I'm talking about in terms of humanities, in terms of facing the humanities, or becoming a really good scholar in a field in the humanities, consider checking out my course on how to write a good essay on Skillshare. So I don't exactly talk about Skillshare a lot on this channel anymore, because this channel is not sponsored by Skillshare, so I don't have to talk about them. But I have a class on Skillshare, which I haven't really discussed at length. But this is basically a class that's going to set up the right attitude for you to study the humanities, because the humanities are so different from any other fields that you've studied before, and especially presently at this time, there's so many prejudiced ways of viewing the humanities as subjects and disciplines that I feel like it's very important to set up a foundation understanding of how to treat the humanities as subjects in their own rights before you dive into the subject. So if you're a humanities student, if you are a literature student, philosophy student, whatever subject, history student in the humanities, consider checking out this course, and you can get it for free by following the link in the description down below. So today we're going to start this topic by relating you guys to a very common experience. You are enrolled into a class, whatever you're interested in, literature, philosophy, or history, or sociology, or whatever humanities subject that you're interested in. But what happens is that as you're studying these subjects, for the first few weeks, it's going to be great. For the first few weeks, it's going to seem like you're enjoying yourself, you're really engaging with the classes, you're reading throughout the source materials. But somewhere along that process, it's almost destined to happen, you tend to lose motivation for the subject. You tend to ask yourself, why am I even studying this subject in the first place? You tend to ask yourself strange questions like, maybe I've chosen a wrong course. This course is not even guaranteeing a career outcome. Am I just going to end up working at Starbucks after this entire degree? So those doubts will start to get to you. And this is the entry point for this discussion on why do humanities students, or any students in general, tend to lose that motivation to learn. So before I started studying the humanities myself, before I've fully jumped ship from science, so I used to be a pre-engineering student, and I studied a lot of mathematics and engineering and advanced theoretical physics, which really drove my head into the wall sometimes. But before, when I was really heavily engaged with the more theoretical or the more mathematical pursuits of physics, relativity, and all the chemistry stuff, what I became aware of is that the final solution to a very complicated mathematics problem, for example, a prime example of this is E equals to mc squared. So a very complicated mathematical problem, or a theoretical physics problem, or a mechanics problem in engineering can have a very simple solution at the end. And it always pissed me off that on the question sheet, there's this long, complicated equation, but at the end, the solution is always so elegant and so simple that sometimes it's easy just to look at the solution and to treat it as the final thing without realizing that there are all these steps that you have to work through in order to reach that conclusion. So then I started thinking about, for example, the application of E equals to mc squared, or some of the formulae that I had to use for my science classes. What became really scary to me was to realize that I didn't actually have to know how the scientist went throughout the processes of deducing this equation. All the engineering school cared about was for us to apply this equation to a specific problem and to turn out a perfect score on a test, for example. and to sort of like use this elegant solution to apply the solution to complicated problems, or to apply the solution to a problem in the test papers. So the process of testing and the process of sort of using knowledge as a purely utilitarian tool slowly became this dominant discourse of education, slowly sort of displaced this concept of developing this willingness to trace through the steps to arrive at a final solution. So this problem is present in science a lot. When you ask an engineering student, how did I get E equals to mc squared? How do we know that matter's energy equals to the mass of the subject, or the mass of the matter times the speed of light squared? They can't tell you, because if you've not seriously studied relativity, it's almost impossible for you to trace through all those steps. So I think in the case of mathematics and engineering, it's actually not that necessary for you to go through all the complicated steps, because they're quite specialized. But if we apply the same problems or the same idea, that the final solution is always simplistic and deceptively simple to the humanities, then we're faced with a really big problem. Because the humanities, unlike the STEM subjects like physics and chemistry and biology or whatever, the final solution, they actually carry sort of like ethical consequences. So philosophy in its original form is supposed to deal with how one should live in their lives. How one should conduct themselves in dealing with people, dealing with society, dealing with problems of society. So the final solution, or the final conclusion, that the philosopher had to literally spend books upon books to explain this final elegant aphorism that they've concocted to sort of explain a universal principle of life. If you don't bother to go through, should I say, the steps they use to arrive at this final conclusion, it is as if you're just taking the idea and running with it. You're just taking whatever's there and just assuming this idea as your own without going through the steps of really reaching a conclusion yourself. So this is a big problem with summary books on philosophy or secondary readings on philosophy, is that you're literally giving up your own mental faculties. You're giving up your own ability to think about a specific book, or your ability to critically engage with a source text in order to reach that conclusion yourself. Because whatever conclusion you've reached, you're going to take that conclusion with you, and you're actually going to apply it to your daily life. You're actually going to use this commentary on society or on people, on how you should treat religion or how you should treat life, as just a received idea. So this idea of received idea was explored by one of my favorite French writers, Gustave Flaubert. So as a part of my French novel unit, I had to read Madame Bovary and, of course, the Dictionary of Received Ideas from Gustave Flaubert. And in the Dictionary of Received Ideas, he basically collected these newspaper articles from Le Journal. He collected all of these newspaper articles, and he wanted to demonstrate that mass circulation of media is perpetuating a new kind of stupidity. And the stupidity is basically giving authority to fools. And where the modern idiot, as he coined, the modern idiot could routinely know what geniuses had known in the past without really going anywhere clever with these ideas, without really going anywhere particularly fascinating with these ideas. So if you've read some of the entries from this Dictionary of Received Ideas, you're going to realize that it's literally the same problem within academia or within university, which is that you're so used to the professor presenting you with these simplified notion of a very particularly complicated text. For example, phenomenology of spirit, which I'm currently trying to tackle, or these very seemingly daunting texts that, as a part of your philosophy major nowadays in academia, they've actually simplified these readings down to commentaries, or they've simplified these readings down to merely subject guides, which is giving you kind of like an obscured version of all these very complicated arguments that you have to go through yourself to reach the final solution, which is which is deceptively elegant and simple when you read it yourself. So it's very, very easy for us just to take that idea by ourselves and just to run with it without questioning it twice, without really questioning this idea that deeply, without really going anywhere clever with this idea. And what's going to happen is that your essay that you're going to write for the subject is going to turn into a patchwork of received ideas. A patchwork of this quote here from this paper, that quote there from that academic. So you're not really doing any critical thinking by engaging with received ideas, of engaging with these concepts that aren't really your own. So then that's going to link us back to the title of this video, which is why is it the case that you're not motivated to study the subjects at your university or at your high school or at your postgrad studies? It's simply the fact that the discourse of education had removed us so far away from this original organic need to investigate subjects. We're replaced this curiosity, this natural curiosity, is a sense of simplified understanding of a specific source text. It's a kind of utilitarian obsession with running with a theory or running with this piece of elegant conclusion to a very complicated philosophical text, or running with these received ideas to achieve an outcome. And this outcome could be political, could be practical, could be ethical, wherever you want to take these ideas. But then you're going to run into the danger of blindly believing these ideas without questioning them. And that's how you run into people that vehemently defend their positions, that are pretty stupid with the way that they defend their positions, where if you get involved with one of these arguments, you're going to see that this person had just adopted some other person's idea as their own. They've never really thought through it. They've never really looked into it. And because of the way that the education system is structured, there's not even the incentive for students, scholars, to critically engage with the processes of, should I say, curiously investigating, what made that philosopher say that? What made that book so significant? So what's the significance of that piece of literature to this piece of history right here? So there's not even that process going on because we've gotten so used to just receiving ideas from professors and receiving ideas from supplementary readings. So there's this obsession with certainty and with logical conclusions, with these deceptively simple solutions to a very complicated problem. So here is basically what I think is going on at the root cause of this lack of curiosity to learn, is that schools and the education system or universities are actually not placing that much of an emphasis on tracing students or encouraging students to critically engage with these very seemingly complicated arguments. All they're concerned about is churning out the next essay. All they're concerned about is getting the best mark for the class. So it's a very utilitarian sort of approach to education with no emphasis on cultivating this ability to reason through arguments, to curiously investigate this process of patiently going through some tedious readings and finally maybe reaching some conclusions yourself. So the entirety of your humanities education, if you're studying a liberal arts degree, if you don't treat this process carefully, it could very easily turn into a process of indoctrination. And it's very dangerous nowadays because politically, especially in academia, it's very tense of these clashes of ideas between different realms. And I think now it's more important than ever that we start to realize that there's a problem here. There's a problem that students don't even have the incentive to patiently go through texts anymore. We don't even have the incentive to investigate anything. We don't even have this curiosity or this drive to sort of think for ourselves. And I think that's something that needs to be cultivated. And that's something that I'm really excited to bring more videos out about in the future. And in fact, this course on Skillshare is going to lead you. It's going to serve as an introduction for you to go through that process of critical thinking yourself. So that, in summary, is my opinions or my conclusion that I've reached for myself of why students are not motivated to study the humanities or study the subjects that they've decided to study. Is simply because the system, in a sense, is structured in a way that's dissuading people more and more and more away from this original spirit of discovery. And we're too obsessed, almost too obsessed, with the utilitarian benefits of regurgitating concepts. And that's all I have for this episode. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and I will link everything in the description down below. And RC Waldun here, and I will see you in the next video.